Hello all and welcome, and I am the MGTOW philosopher, and in today's video I'd like to talk about MRA, men's rights activist groups, and why they are a complete and utter waste of time. Now I'm sure that some of you MRAs out there will say, but MGTOW philosopher, how can it be a waste of time to fight for men's rights? It's the only way things will change. If we do nothing, then the feminazis and other leftists of the world will just keep on winning, right? I used to think in a similar way. I used to believe that men would have to come together in some organized way and fight the feminazis in a way that was similar to how they had fought us and consequently won. By the way, I no longer think that way. Now, true, there are some cases where activism will actually make a difference if people can be shaken out of their apathy. However, the men's rights cause, that's not one of those causes that can be won through activism. For you see, while things like free speech and freedom in general are causes that can unite both men and women, at least those women who haven't been completely driven mad by feminism and leftism, the narrative of the evil male oppressor out to disenfranchise women and make their lives a living hell, well, that's a narrative that's just too deeply ingrained in the minds of most people in the West. Thanks to feminism. And thanks to feminism and the left, the world by and large hates men. Even men hate men, and hate themselves as well for the so-called sins of men from the past and what those evil men did, as well as hating their own so-called toxic natures. Natures that aren't supposed to even exist objectively, as it's all just some kind of social construct, right? And that they by themselves have never done anything evil towards a woman, well, that's irrelevant. No, because the scourge that is identity politics has created a reality in which all men are responsible for what other men do and have done in the past, even if those men are already long dead. Not to mention the false narrative of oppression that continues to be spread to this very day, which says that men are in charge of everything and oppress women on a daily basis in the West. A lie, to be sure, but speak a lie enough and everyone will eventually come to believe it. Now, perhaps some of you heard me say that all women are part of the problem. That's because all women, no matter how moderate they may be in their views, they've still been infected with the evil cancer that is feminism. Therefore, no matter how stable and fair-minded they may seem on the outside, there is an evil ideology lurking beneath the surface. And, like any Manchurian candidate, they can be triggered with the right code word or words to do their pre-programmed job. And that code word is basically anything that disagrees with the false narrative that they've been programmed to believe. If you mention any of men's concerns, women's programming will be triggered, and they will be triggered. And when this happens, their eyes will glaze over as if they're possessed, and the oppression narrative that they've been taught will kick into full gear. Suddenly, what was, prior to you saying anything, a perfectly nice lady, will now change in front of your eyes and break into singing a song such as "Cry Me a River" when confronted with male suicide stats or some other such nonsense. With as empathetic as women are supposed to be, the moment anyone brings up how hard a man has it in life, you'll be immediately shut down by bringing up such ridiculous nonsense.
What are you talking about? Who are all the politicians? They're men. Who are all the CEOs? They're men. Who are all the bankers and leaders in industry? They're men. Yeah, boo-hoo-hoo. Men killing themselves a lot. So what? Yeah, you men have it so hard. You rule the world and complain because no one appreciates you. How about you stop oppressing women and start doing something good for a change by helping us to gain equality? You scum!
This is the type of response you can expect to get from your typical Western woman. And usually it won't even be this well thought out. And most times you'll just get laughed at and insulted, as if what you had to say was so patently absurd that your words, well, they're not even worth any arguments or counter-arguments. Oh no, they're only worth derision. This might also be the case if you talk to a man who's your typical white knight mangina simp.
A woman has to work twice as hard as a man. Men view women as nothing more than sex objects, as slabs of beef. Women don't have access to the same opportunities as men do because men are still sexist and in charge of everything, and they actively oppress women. The patriarchy is real, and it exists to enfranchise men and disenfranchise women. Yada, yada. Nonsense, of course, except for the sexual objectification part, which is perfectly fine, as women only view us as walking wallets. As for the other complaints, and more or less all complaints feminists have, well, they're utter nonsense. I mean, let's face it, they've won the war. They won the war long ago. And they simply continue marching and fighting and reshaping the landscape to suit their needs, even though they've already won. That's why they complain that they haven't, so they can continue to grab ever more power. So much power that men are now the disenfranchised ones. Yes, they continue to march. They continue to lie. They continue to spread false narratives saying that they themselves are the ones who are still being disenfranchised. Because if they stop, if they admit the truth, that they have indeed achieved equality and in fact have achieved superiority, then the jig will be up. The demonization of men would cease. And women, men, and society as a whole would no longer be blinded to the disenfranchisement of men via the distraction that is the women's rights movement. And those who do see it now, but ignore it, well, they would no longer be able to justify ignoring it because men would no longer be oppressive scum who deserved what they were getting. You know, it's easy to turn a blind eye to men's issues if the evil men are getting what they deserve for having oppressed women for centuries and for continuing to oppress them to this very day. But it's not so easy to turn a blind eye when men are doing nothing wrong. Hence, they must be constantly lambasted as scum, as oppressors, as the evil, omnipresent uber enemy who needs to be fought collectively if he is to be defeated. But once that lambasting stops, once the war is won, women would have no justification for the superiority that they've gained in Western society. Hence, believing that you can change things through activism of any kind is folly in regards to advocating for men's rights. Because not only do we not control the narrative, but we men don't have the benefit of a century of indoctrination on our side. The other thing we don't have, of course, is the vote. They control the vote. And be it by 1% or 21%, there's no escaping the fact that there's more of them than us. And they tend to vote collectively, meaning along identity lines. That being the case, we most certainly do not live in a patriarchy, and we never have. Now, in the past, pre-feminism, what we had was a system of governance that was focused around gender roles and acknowledging the reality of those roles. There was no male privilege, no female privilege, no. It wasn't like it is today, where women are twice as likely to get a job as a man if both apply. No. It wasn't like it is today, where in 147 of America's 150 biggest cities, women actually make more money than men do. No. It wasn't like it is today, where 65% of all college graduates are women. No. It wasn't like it is today, where in almost all divorces, women will get much of the man's money, the house, his kids, child support, and alimony. No. It wasn't like it is today, where women get the lion's share, 85% of all welfare, and many times the health care of a man. No. It wasn't like it is today, where more than 90% of the homeless are men. No. It wasn't like it is today, where even talking to a woman can be criminalized depending on whether or not she wants you to talk to her or not. And if she doesn't, you're a sexual harasser, and it's jail for you. No. It wasn't like it is today, where any woman can accuse you of rape and put you in jail with zero evidence. Because, hey, her word is the gold standard, and yours? Well, your word as a man, it's worthless.
I'm failing to see the patriarchy that justified the actions of women both in the past and in today's modern world. That's, of course, because it never existed. Anyhow, what you have to understand is that in a democracy, the person who has the vote is the person who has the power. It doesn't matter who's in the White House or who's in the Senate or who's in the Congress. These things are totally irrelevant. For you see, politicians, they do whatever the voter wants. And with the continuing rise of identity politics, making people feel ever more collectivized around sex and racial lines, and what with intersectionality helping tie all these supposed oppressed groups of people together under one umbrella of oppression, you have women and all other supposed groups, oppressed groups, now able to collectively come together and vote in the same way against who they've been taught is their primary enemy. Of course, meaning men, and white men to be more specific, because they, of course, are the easiest to vilify. So, not only do men have feminists to contend with, which is most women, as they've all been indoctrinated to one degree or another into feminist ideology, but you also have the Muslims, the gays, the lesbians, the trans people, the brown people, and the blacks for us men to contend with. Just to name a few. Because all you need to do is not be in the majority, and you are suddenly a victim class according to the narrative of the day. And being a victim, well, that pays dividends these days, don't you know? And by the way, if you think that men who are among these minority groups see the danger to themselves that leftism and feminism, Marxism essentially represents, well, think again, because most of them are still blue-pilled, white knight mangina simps who will vote in whatever way lets them dip their wick, or offers the possibility of doing so. And also keep in mind that many of these men have been raised by single mothers. That being the case, they have learned the proper amount of self-hate and self-flagellation. Yeah, good luck turning the majority of these blue-pilled boys into men who would vote in their own best interest. Ain't gonna happen. However, even if you did, by some miracle, manage to wake every single one of these men up to the folly of their actions. Hell, if you were able to wake up every man in the world, in the Western world, to the folly of their actions, you still wouldn't have a chance. Why? Because the women still control the vote. You know, it's funny how easily people are fooled into believing these stupid narratives, namely that men are still somehow running things just because they're the majority of politicians. I mean, what utter nonsense. Politicians merely represent their voters, the majority of their voters. Yes, that's right. Democracy. And there's nothing so bad as a pure democracy, because they always seem to lead to collectivism and ruin. Hence why America was established as a constitutional republic, not a democracy. Yet here we are in 2017 with ever more democracy creeping into the system, with the voice of the mob, the majority, becoming ever more prominent in the goings-on of day-to-day life, with the protections being eroded away day by day, at least for those who the majority doesn't like. Now, yes, elected officials are charged with upholding the Constitution and not following the whims of the mob. Sadly, something that can become corrupt, more often than not, does. Equal protection under the law is no longer guaranteed. And politicians who care more about re-election than doing what's right, well, they end up passing laws to favor the majority instead of championing what is right and good. Not that politics was ever such a noble path to begin with, but you always had idealistically minded, good-hearted people in similar positions to those of the monsters to help counter the monsters' influence. Not so much anymore. And it's this corrupt system that works only to serve its own interests that MRAs, meaning men's rights activists, seek to co-opt, that they want to help them, that they want to somehow use to serve their needs as men. A naive hope, to say the least. The slave has no power, no vote, no currency with which to buy his freedom. Yet he's still trying to convince the slave master to free him because it's the right and noble thing to do. If the slave master cared about what was right and noble, and if he saw you as a person, then he wouldn't be your master in the first place. So, think again, slave. Look, changing the system from within, it's a fool's errand. It's a pipe dream, at least in regards to how men are treated. Why? Because such changes don't serve women's interests. Every bit of aid given to men is less aid given to women. It's less power that women have. And only fools willingly give away their power, especially power that has been wrongly gained. Because those who gained and maintained that power for so long, they will always fear what might happen to them should their slaves be freed. No. You won't be convincing those people who've spent 100+ years purposefully seeking the ruination of the Western world to give up their hard-earned power simply because it's the right and noble thing to do. Get out of here. I mean, that's naive to the extreme. You see, something that MRAs have totally missed is the fact that the system is like a game, a rigged game. But it's a game nonetheless. And seeing as it's rigged and you're always going to lose, what's the point of playing? You know, there's a reason why the house always wins. And fools who think they can beat the house, well, they go home with empty pockets. But smart men who choose not to play, well, they don't lose anything. The bottom line is this: don't waste your time protesting or being any kind of activist, because you'll never change anything via that route. And the only thing you'll end up doing once you organize, which is something you have to do to protest, to be an activist, is to make yourself a target. And once that happens, you will then be targeted, infiltrated by the very forces you are trying to destroy, and then you will be destroyed instead, either from within, without, or both. That's what happened to MRAs. They organized, and therefore they were able to be targeted and neutralized. However, if you refuse to waste your time in what is a futile effort, then you won't be exposing yourself to being targeted in the first place. If you refuse to organize, then the enemy will have a very hard time identifying you and can in no way infiltrate that which doesn't exist to begin with. You also will avoid the depression and demoralization that comes with constant effort that yields zero results. In refusing to play the game, you contribute the minimum amount to the system that's actually oppressing you, while at the same time protecting yourself mentally, physically, and financially. Good. By the way, the idea that you can be a successful activist for men's rights is one that's encouraged by the left. Yes, let those fools believe they can actually change things from within. Let them spin their wheels uselessly. Meanwhile, we now know who they are, where they are, and we can take active steps to neutralize them. Yes, the left and the global elites, as well as their useful idiot puppets, they know that as men, you'll have zero luck changing things, because they're the ones that are in charge and they control the narrative. But they also know that letting you believe that you can affect change gives you hope, and it keeps you plugged into the very system that's feeding off of you. Yes, that hope, that belief that you can affect change, it keeps you plugged into your role as a plow horse. It keeps you plugged into your role as a beta provider. It keeps you plugged into your role as a protector. It keeps you plugged into your role as a simp. It keeps you plugged into your role as a blue-pilled white knight mangina. Yes, it keeps you plugged into the role of a man who is holding out hope that he can make a difference for the better from inside the system. This is why we men don't have a snowball's chance in hell of winning via protest or activism. I mean, really, how on earth are you going to affect change using the very institutions that have been created with the sole purpose of working against you and enslaving you in the first place? I mean, honestly, does the slave master free his slave because it's good for the slave? No. Whatever he does it because it's good for him. If it's not good for him, he doesn't do it. No, you cannot affect change through activism, at least not in these circumstances. But you can refuse to play. You can walk away. You can be a man. You can be a man going your own way. I am the MGTOW philosopher, and I wish you a good day. Take care.